Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back again to Rejuvenate 2021, Edition 1. We are so happy. We've had a fully packed day 2, and we've now landed in Arizona, obviously, to welcome our next speaker, Darryl Benally. Darryl, of course, let me give you a short introduction. He is an Indigenous Navajo licensed professional counselor and school psychologist. Obviously, I've mentioned he's currently based in Arizona. He is also a US Army veteran in the Airborne Infantry and a grandson of Navajo Code Talker. So perhaps we will get him to talk a little bit more about that as well. But before that, let me welcome Darryl. Hi, Darryl. How are you doing?
Yes, hello, Andrew. Thank you. I'm going well.
Great to have you on board. I guess we'll jump right into it. Perhaps in your own words, who is Darryl Benally? Perhaps introduce to our audience who you are, and then we can get acquainted.
Well, first of all, Andrew, I want to thank you for allowing me to be part of this panel. I wanted to tell the audience, it means hello Navajo. Shay, Darryl Benally, and Sleth. My name is Darryl Benally. I'm from Arizona. I'm Indigenous, as what Andrew mentioned. I'm Navajo, Dene. And so my clans are Born for the Water, a Mexican clan. And I grew up on a Navajo reservation. I spent the majority of my life here. So I own Warrior Psychological Consulting. I work with local schools on the Navajo reservation, providing counseling services and psychoeducational evaluations and consultations with adults. So the reservation itself is located in Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah, about the size of the state of West Virginia in the United States. Currently, about maybe 350,000 people live on the reservation. The unemployment rate is 48%, and the poverty rate is 60%. And so we have a lot of barriers when it comes to providing good education to our youth and families. So I'm not sure how much more you wanted me to discuss about myself, Andrew.
I think there will be enough. That's really nice. Now, going to back to Warrior Psychological Consulting, how did that come about?
I started my business in 2014, and prior to working for Warrior Psychological Consulting, I was a assistant professor of counseling with Western New Mexico University. I'm teaching graduate students, training students to be counselors, and also I worked for the Bureau of Indian Education as a school psychologist. And so my wife, I was living in New Mexico, and so my wife wanted to come back to the state of Arizona on a reservation. As I mentioned, the unemployment rate is high, and there's a limited resources. So I had to start my own business. When it came to working here, that's how my company sort of emerged. So I have about maybe 6 people working for me, providing services to the Navajo people, and that's basically how the origin of Warrior Psychological Consulting had started.
Now you have mentioned high unemployment rate a couple of times now.
Yes.
I guess where do we begin to I guess understand why that comes about?
Well, I have to give a brief overview as far as the history of the Navajo reservation. Extending back into the 1860s to where my people were taken off our ancestral land and taken to a place called Bosque Redondo in New Mexico. It was about maybe a 350-mile forced march from Arizona to that location. And so my people were held in captivity for approximately 4 years. And this march, it was a forced march to where the people fell behind, they were shot on sight. And so a lot of people had passed away at Bosque Redondo in New Mexico. And so they were eventually allowed to leave in 1868. That's how our Navajo Treaty was established. And we're allowed to come back to our ancestral area, but just in the size that I mentioned, the size of the state of West Virginia and Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah, but the ancestral lands were a lot bigger. So since that time, people had gone through what's called intergenerational trauma. It's very similar to what the Holocaust survivors have gone through when it came to the Nazi occupation of Europe. And so our people had this learned helplessness when it came to being on our ancestral lands. And so fortunately, that type of mentality perpetuated into current times, into where people experience depression and anxiety. And so they had this idea of learned helplessness. And so that's kind of how it is on a reservation, especially with the limited amount of work. People have to travel very far for employment. For example, some people have to travel 2 or 3 hours to get to a job site. So that provides a lot of barriers as far as having adequate employment for the Navajo people. That's kind of the purpose or the premise as to why the unemployment rate is so high where I live. Hello, Andrew, are you still there? Hello, Andrew. I'm not sure if you can still hear me, but I just wanted to continue on with the panel discussion.
Yeah.
Hello,
Can
Andrew,
you
still
hear
there?
me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, good. Just give me one short second.
Okay.
A little bit of a technical issue here, but we can continue talking. Not a problem at all. Okay. You know, as I was saying, infrastructure wise, you know, obviously in the reservation there is some form of what you call barrier in terms of infrastructure. How's that affecting education as I move the conversation towards that?
Well, as it relates to education, there are some public schools through the state of Arizona and New Mexico and Utah that's on the reservation, but the majority of schools are government based. They're funded by the Bureau of Indian Education with the United States government. And so the schools are spread out at the moment. And as it relates to unemployment, there are boarding schools that exist on the reservation. For example, the kids will live on the campus throughout the work week, just due to either parents having to be employed off the reservation, or else some of the kids may have difficulty making it to the school on time, just because of where they live in very desolate and isolated locations on the reservation. And so I know that on the reservation, schools are one of the larger employments where people come and work. So to get a job working in a school, typically a person has to have a college education. It's the same way with working for Indian Health Services and different entities on the reservation. And people have to be educated, and it's a lot of times that's not really stressed as far as going out and becoming educated, getting a higher degree or terminal degree. So that's something that we're working on as far as work with our youth is we're trying to bridge that gap when it comes to making that transition from secondary to post-secondary, from high school to college. Right now, Native American people are the lowest when it comes to obtaining a bachelor's degree. And so that really has an effect on our local economy. And then the people that do go to college, they choose not to live on a reservation just because in local towns, there's more amenities, more places to eat, more places to shop. And so it's more of a convenient for the youth to live there versus coming back to the reservation and building the infrastructure. So that's kind of one of our goals is to do that, is to encourage our youth to come back and take on a lot of these types of employment. So I'm hoping that we can work in that direction to where we can build the local economy. That's one of my concerns of working in education, being one of the leaders, if you may, when it comes to working with youth. So hopefully, Andrew, that answers your question. Hello, Andrew, are you still there?
Can you hear me, Darryl?
Yes, Andrew, I can hear you.
Okay. As I was saying, you obviously one of the leaders of the community, and you work very closely with youths in your community as well. I was just wondering, what is the level of their observation like in terms of environment conservation in your region or within your conservation itself? Are they interested to know? Are they interested to help? Are they interested to be involved?
Well, somewhat, yes. And just to give you an idea of the industry that's located on the reservation, a big part of it involves natural gas and people working at power plants, the burning of coal. And so most recently, that's become a concern for the Navajo Nation, as far as the level of toxins that come from different types of generating stations for electricity. Like, for example, my whole family worked at a local mine. Like my whole generation, my grandfather, my father, and so lately a lot of those type of industries have been shutting down. But they're trying to convert to more energy sources that are consideration of the environment. And but as far as our youth, I mean, some do have some concern, especially now, as I mentioned before on our talk, Andrews, that there are a lot of forest fires in Arizona. Mm-hmm. And so right now outside it's smoky. It's usually I get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and I do my morning run, but the smoke is very thick. Mm-hmm. and so we can't really go out and run. But as far as youth themselves, a lot of times they do consider the effects of the environment, but it seems the majority of families are more concerned about putting food on the table, having enough electricity. There's a large portion of people that don't have adequate electricity and running water within their homes. And so sometimes families are more concerned about this, and so that's one thing that we're trying to do, working in schools, is to introduce this fact that preserving the environment is very important, especially for our way of life. For our there are people who also grow crops. They have fields, even though it's dry, but they still manage to grow vegetables and other types of food sources. And a lot of people do have livestock, horses, goats, cows. And so when the weather is when there's limited precipitation, that affects the earth to where we don't see a lot of grasses that are grown for livestock, and so that does come a concern for families when it comes to having enough grass on the ground for our livestock and for our animals to thrive. So hopefully to answer your question, Andrew.
Yes, yes, it does. Now, I do have a question here that just came in on the chat box, and this is from Eugene. It says here, "Hi, Darryl. Is there any government interventions in regards to the issues of unemployment, in particular, that is happening in the reservation?"
What's up? Hello, Eugene, and thank you for your question. Yes, there is some government intervention, but there's not enough. Like, for example, the Navajo Nation had introduced the idea of casinos, and so I mean that employs some of the people, but irregardless, people do have to travel. Like, for example, the local casino from where I live is about maybe an hour and a half to get there, and some families do work at these places. And so, as far as intervention from the Navajo Nation, yes, there is some relief, but exactly from the Navajo Nation, from the U.S. government itself, a lot of the money that is for these different types of funding sources do funnel through from the U.S. government through the Navajo Nation, and the Navajo Nation is considered a sovereign nation, and so. But unfortunately, there is a lot of politics involved as far as who gets the money and how the money is spent. I know right now there's the CARES Act, which is covert relief for a lot of the communities on the reservation. But unfortunately, that gets tied up in politics, and sometimes the ill effects of politics does affect the people such as myself and people that live within my community, which they don't receive the adequate funds that they're entitled to. And so just as in any country, politics does play a negative role as far as how the money is dispersed. So hopefully, like once the care money does come in, we can establish some good programs for our people. For example, there is some that some programs that encourage self-reliance, to where people can get some funding as they look out for jobs and different types of employment. But unfortunately, with COVID, we got hit very hard last year. I mean, the Navajo Nation kind of led the way as far as the number of COVID cases. I think last year we're having like maybe 300 per day, and I don't recall the exact number of people that passed without looking at my statistics, but. Just as Andrew mentioned that Malaysia was in a lockdown, that's kind of how we were, to where we couldn't leave the reservation. We had to get permission and had the right documentation. And so a lot of those restrictions are lifting, that just because the Navajo Nation has got the COVID numbers down. So hopefully that would contribute to people going out and finding employment and being able to supply for their families.
I guess the situation is very similar all over the world in that sense. I mean, at the end of the day, youth unemployment is also something the Malaysian government is trying to tackle, and it's $1 million question that nobody is able to answer in terms of how do we reduce it in the short term and in the midterm as well as in the long term, you know. So I
Yes.
guess we are all in the same boat, regardless of where we are. You know, Lottie Dowling just shared this morning about global citizenship, and I think this is one good example of that. Now, going towards a little bit more, I know we spoke a little bit about education and youth and whatnot. How do you then try to assimilate all these teachings into a curriculum of sorts? Is that even possible within the community?
Yes, it is possible. And unfortunately, the curriculum is dictated by the Bureau of Indian Education. I know right now, like on a reservation, the main focus is having good test scores and good data. And so that leaves a little bit of just a small degree of room when it comes to making changes to the curriculum. And so that's one thing I've been working on with Lottie Dowling and others through Clubhouse, was to have these conversations when it comes to talking about our cause, as far as introducing the idea of preserving the environment, especially coming from an Indigenous standpoint. And what I mean by that is that we have a high regard for the earth and for the sky and for the environment itself. As far as believing that we are children of the earth and of the sky, and that the earth does provide for our livelihood, for our way of life. And so right now, the way that it's introduced as far as the curriculum is through Navajo cultural type courses. So that is allowed when it comes to the curriculum, trying to influence the curriculum. So I'm hoping that we can introduce that further, as far as actually integrating this whole idea of preserving our way of life through environmental awareness through our curriculum. But unfortunately, as I mentioned, we do compete with this whole notion of having high test scores and meeting adequate yearly progress. And so unfortunately, a lot of these programs do involve a lot of data, test scores and such, short-term, short cycle assessments to see if our kids are adapting to the curriculum. Mm-hmm. So but one drawback of the whole curriculum itself is it doesn't, like when it was developed, it doesn't really include subjects from our reservation, as far as when people mention that curriculum has to be research-based or evidence-based. And so fortunately, that doesn't include the samples from our reservation, as far as how this curriculum is implemented and how it's developed. So I'm hoping in future times, I mean, that's the concern of my generation, is how we can preserve our way of life, our language, our culture, especially when it comes to raising awareness about the environment. I mean, that's, as I mentioned before, some of us do still practice the traditional way of life, as far as collecting herbs and different types of medicinal ingredients from the earth. And unfortunately, the lack of rain and the lack of moisture does have an effect on that. So we're hoping we can raise that awareness when it comes to infusing that within our curriculum.
So having said that, I would assume that there is very minimal engagement with stakeholders in terms of, you were saying, trying to include those what you call observations and whatnot from a Navajo perspective, or from the reservation's perspective, into the curriculum, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, good. So I guess, again, this is a problem that runs across most countries. So it's not just in Malaysia that we are experiencing such difficulties in terms of engaging with the in our case would be the Ministry of Education, for example, to have that dialogue and conversation with people who are literally on the ground in terms of trying to make this kind of changes. Now, you kind of spoke a little bit about this, but based on what Julia has just asked us on the chat, it says here, hello there, Darryl. How can one apply your work on environment conservation in the Navajo region but in a totally different culture or environment setting, since every culture is different? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, yes. I mean, a lot of cultures are different when it comes to our way of life and upbringing and our language. But what I'm starting to realize by this whole idea of global education is that we do have a lot in common, as what Andrew had mentioned, with some of the concerns with conserving the environment as Indigenous people. And so by linking up with different communities throughout our clubhouse, different Aboriginal communities, Indigenous communities, even like the Maori of New Zealand and Australia, different places, and up towards North America, into Canada, and down into South America with the Indigenous people of that region. When it comes to our way of life, I mean, that's something that we do share in common as far as trying to preserve our language, our culture, when it comes to preserving the environment. I know that especially with the exploitation of the earth, with capitalist type nations such as the United States, essentially hogging the majority of resources by using what's called the military industrial complex to get whatever type of resources to fund a lot of the corporations. I mean, that does exist within our nation, within the Navajo Nation. We were the first to be exploited as far as our people taken to the reservation, and with these conditions set to where we have high unemployment. And so what I'm starting to understand through global education is that we also do share the same concerns of other people throughout the world when it comes to trying to have this whole idea of social justice, environmental justice, preserving our way of life. But especially for the Navajo, our way of life has a direct tie with preserving the environment. I mean, that's kind of where we're from, and what we're trying to advocate for.
So Darryl,
at
the end of the day,
that answer your question. Yes, sir.
Oh yes, definitely. I'm sure Julia would appreciate the response from you as well. Now, having said that, what would you say to I guess let me structure it this way. What would you say to a Navajo youth today with regards to environment conservation, and what would you say to a global citizen or a global youth in terms of environment conservation as well?
Well, where I live, we used to have a lot of natural wells, and so I live on my wife's land, where she's from, and so a lot of those wells are dried now. I mean, there's no water, and so I know back in my time, because I'm 46 years of age, growing up on a reservation, the water was a lot more abundant as far as what was available for our crops, for our livestock, and we seem to have taken that for granted. I mean, when I think back to my youth, and so I mean, my message to the Navajo Diné youth, the Indigenous youth, is to preserve this water that we have. Don't waste it, take it for granted. Find other means of trying to harness this environment to gain water. It's a very important natural resource. I know that some other people I work with have been reaching out to other communities to develop technology. For example, there is technology out there that draws moisture from the environment to make certain liters of water per day. And so I would encourage our youth to learn this type of technology when it comes to helping our people. And so that's kind of our premises when it comes to obtaining this idea of STEM culture or STEM education, to develop these skills, these engineering skills, to come up with this methodology for harnessing water and different resources to help preserve that way of life. So my message out there to the global youth from different parts of the environment is to is a reach out to our people that we can somehow work together to help one another. I think in unity, that's kind of how we can establish and accomplish a lot, even though like we come from different parts of the world, but when we come together as people, I mean, we are unstoppable. We're capable of doing whatever as far as making this earth a lot better for everybody, not for just for the Navajo Indigenous youth, but for everybody throughout the world. That we do share this concern when it comes to preserving the environment. That we see it in current times, especially with the increased fires and how like there is like within the Southwest United States, the environment's more drier, which unfortunately encourages more and more forest fires. But then I imagine like just looking through the news and talking to people through the caps of the earth, the north and south pole, where a lot of these places they're starting to melt, and it's increasing the shoreline within different parts of the world. So we all share this global kind of concern when it comes to preserving the environment, because this is where we live. We're all from the earth. It doesn't matter where we're from or the color of our skin or language we speak. We all live here. We all have to do our part as far as preserving the environment.
Darryl, those are beautiful words, and I hope everyone caught that and really truly appreciate what you just shared. I think those are real wisdom that's coming out from a true leader of the community and true leader of the reservation as well. And Darryl, with that, I would like to thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing with us. Thank you for for the experiences that you've had at the conservation, and we truly appreciate your time.
Well, Andrew, it's my deepest pleasure, and you are most welcome. And thank you for everybody in the audience. I appreciate you being here and listening to me.
Wonderful. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, we have wrapped up 2 days of Rejuvenate 2021, edition 1, where we spoke about, obviously in conjunction with World Environment Day, where we got people to rethink about climate change, rethinking education and youth, rethinking societal needs. So with that, I would like to thank our speakers, Shakil Suhaimi, Nisha, YB Yobiin, Mr. Julian Hyde, Panda Vatanian, who was in London, Lottie Dowling this morning, Aru Ayuni from Kami, Teddy Slavcheva in sunny Cyprus, Jimo Sorodio in Tampa, Florida, and of course, all the way in Arizona, waking up very early for us this morning, Darryl Benally. And with that, I bid everyone a good night and a good day to wherever you are, wherever you are tuning in from. Thank you so much, and we hope to see you again next month in the next edition of Rejuvenate 2021, where we will be talking about World Youth Skills Day. Thank you so much, people. Bye-bye. Take care. Stay safe. Stay safe, Darryl.
Thank you, Andrew. Take care.